Welcome. What's going on? Episode 12 of In the AM with MC. We have so much to discuss with you today. We'll probably get a lot of content out in the next week or so, just because I have a little break here in my day-to-day. But yeah, man. Episode 12, I'm looking at the agenda right now that I write down on my yellow legal pad. I mentioned this once on the show before, but yellow legal pad, they have gone out of style a little bit. Everybody should go back to planning life out in a yellow legal pad. But let's get into it. Talking a little bit of track. Congratulations, first and foremost, to everybody who performed well at the USATF um, national track meet, national championship track meet. Obviously, um, USATF has a problem. And I'm saying that in the same way they say, America has a problem. The Beyonce song, USATF has a problem. Just imagine me saying it like that because, I just don't know where to start. But I think that I will start with the lack of publicizing the meet in a way that is free or a way that's accessible. It was a 2-day meet, I believe. They might have had a third day, but I believe it was 2 days because there's less events for the heptathletes and for the multis, indoors and outdoors. So I believe it was 2 days, and they announced that the first day would not be televised. Could you imagine? Just try for the sake of argument to imagine if they put on March Madness and they said we're only going to televise the championship. That's great, but I don't have the story. I don't have the lore. I don't have all that I need to have to be participatory in being a fan during the championship because you've robbed me of the fan experience. Like you continually have taken the fan experience and moved it away from what fans aspire the fan experience to be like, right? If you grow up, let's like people, you remember your early sports memories and you aspire to one day participate in those memories as a different kind of fan, like as either in an increased capacity or just in an adult capacity, right? Like you should be able to have the same amount of fun as a track meet or similar fun if you're at a 7U track meet than if you're at um, you know, a Barcelona track meet or a Beijing track meet, right? As far as like what is accessible and like what is fun to you and like what you're able to be in close proximity to. Like I believe that a lot of the great track athletes in America and beyond are almost untouchable, not because they're too big or they're bigger than the program, but they're untouchable because USATF and many other organizations, right? The World Athletic Federation is another organization that is limiting the exposure for these athletes. And on the flip side of that, right, you have many athletes who were able to produce high marks and who were able to become champions and things like that, who might not have otherwise been there because a lot of the stars do not compete indoors and a lot of the stars do not compete at USATF indoor meets. I mean, where's Sydney McLaughlin? I mean, I look at Femke Bowl and I look at what she's able to do overseas and it adds so much allure to the sport, it adds so much allure to who Femke Bowl is, and it makes you want to root for her, right? Because you see the pride that she has when she competes, um, country and pro affiliation aside, her competing, Femke Bowl competing. Forget Femke Bowl for US or Femke Bowl for Nike. I'm talking about her as an athlete. And so when you have so many of these athletes who just seem to want to come around, when it's Olympic time, not competing indoors at what is supposed to be a massive track meet, it's very bothersome as a fan of track, right? So you have some of these marks that aren't representative of where their event actually is, right? And then you also have some of these athletes who are getting big opportunities, but only because other athletes aren't there. And you never want that, right? You want the winning time to reflect the winner. You want the winning score to reflect the winner, and so on and so on and so on. Massive shout out to the stars, the name brand athletes who do come out time and time again, who do show up time and time again. Grant Holloway has 82 wins in a row in the 60-meter hurdles, which is his premier event. 80 in the indoor circuit. 82 wins in a row. That's unheralded. That's unprecedented. You in my lifetime, we've lived to see tons of win streaks in sports. Most notably UConn's in women's basketball that was over 100 games. But 82 wins, and every time it's a different field. I would be very interested. I need to reach out to our plug at the Elias Sports Bureau to see if all 82 of the fields in which he won were unique fields because I believe they were. He's taken so many names, and Grant Holloway has elevated sprinting on a global level, but also on an American level. I think every time that he goes to a championship, it's him and then two other guys. It's always who's going, but who else is going with Grant? That's always the mentality. And because of him, we've been able to see U.S. teams that feature Freddie Crittenden and Devin Allen and Trey Cunningham and Cordell Tinch and Dylan Beard and have all these teams kind of rotate guys, just showing you how good Grant is. And when he does end up going to these global meets, there's maybe one guy who can challenge him. And it might be a Jamaican, it might be Parchment, or it might be, you know, Ortega like a couple years ago, maybe. But I mean, nowadays, I don't know. I don't know how many guys really can challenge Grant. And the thing that breaks my heart is when someone emerges who can consistently challenge Grant, right? Then he'll almost be forgot about. You look at the Frenchman in the pole vault, and you look at him in juxtaposition to Mondo Duplantis. That Renaud, he elevated the sport. He's been a great ambassador for the sport. He just set a master's record. He's the oldest person to ever vault over 5'8" meters. And he's almost phased out of the sport because now it's Mondo Duplantis. And I don't think anyone is ever going to break Mondo's records. I really don't. But the point is that when he's done competing, he's just going to get phased out. Um, Grant Holloway is 1/100th of a second off of the world record. So because the sport is always about fast as this, fast as that, maybe that's another reason he doesn't get, these brand deals, and he's not the face of track, but he should be the face of track. He shouldn't have to drop to the 100 meters. He shouldn't have to go to any specific meets. He shouldn't have to politic. He should be the face of track. He should have been on the 4x4 at many of the global meets, or the 4x1. He's just a massive star that the sport is squandering, and it breaks my heart because Grant Holloway chose track over football, right? But you can make the argument that if he no, there's not, it's not making the argument. It is the argument, right? That if he was as successful in football as he is in track, he would be a household name, as opposed to right now being a track household name, which I'm sure he appreciates, but it's not the same. 82 wins in a row. All of these football streaks, this person had 1,000 games with a touchdown, 1,000 games without an interception, like all of these small stats that we keep track of for football and basketball and sometimes baseball, that doesn't exist in track and field. And so, one of the coaches I coach with, a great mentor of mine, he always talks about how many times Usain Bolt ran 9.5 and how many times he ran 9.6, and the answer is one and one. And so it's like you did all of that, right? You trained that much to kind of be remembered in these ways. People don't look at when Usain Bolt was running in his last years, when he was on his literal last legs and he was running 9.85s and 9.87s and smoking young dudes. Even the 9.9s he ran were impressive, because a win is a win. But yeah, the USATF, between the lack of promo, the lack of star power, the lack of adequate winning marks in certain events, it really does ruin that aspect of the sport. Outdoors will always kind of be outdoors in certain countries and in certain places know how to throw a track meet, and know how to participate in track meet that can mask some of that stuff. But yeah, that really does sit poorly with myself as somebody who's a fan of track and field and who likes to see these people perform and make enough money to feed their families and so on and so on. One of our other coaches, she went number 2 in the triple jump. Massive shout out to her. She's the GOAT. She always practices what she preaches, and she walks the life that she lives. And I'm really, really proud of her. Honored to call her a colleague of mine. But yeah, moving on from track, NFL Combine has gone underway since the last episode, and I believe it's beginning to wrap up now. And now we enter the season of pro days, right? Guys start to have pro days, or schools have pro days, but it's really for guys. For example, the Colorado Pro Day, that's the Shador Sanders Pro Day. And it's really the Shiloh Sanders Pro Day as well, right? I believe their pro day is April 25th or something like that. That's a big day for all those guys to make some money at Colorado. Shiloh Sanders has no numbers to grasp onto. Like he just has the film, he has the lowlights, he has the highlights, he has the name, but it does hurt him that he's a 25-year-old safety who's not super physically imposing during a time where teams are getting guys like Kyle Hamilton. Like that does hurt him. Like that's not encouraging for him. It does hurt that he's the second best safety on his own team. Cameron Silman Craig, who has been playing with Deion Sanders and Shador Sanders since the high school days, is miles ahead of him, in my opinion. I think his physicality, his feel for the game, his run fits, he's better. And so, if he goes fourth round, fifth round, where does Shiloh Sanders go? That's the question that I have. But if Cameron goes third round, then that's a good sign if you're Shiloh, because you're like, all right, well, if that guy who I played next to is third round, what am I? Right? Their defense was better than people give it credit for. It was really, really hard to watch their defense that first year, especially because everybody named Mom would have uh the game of their life against Colorado. But I think that this year they reined it in just a little bit. Um, you see their best linebackers being poached by Alabama, right? Like they're no slouch defensively this year, and Shiloh Sanders did contribute to that. Cameron Silman Craig, I think, is going to make an NFL team very happy. But the combine itself, right? So one thing that I do not like about I'm just going to go down the list. One thing I don't like about the combine is the kinds of drills. They're not all players don't have to do all kinds of drills, because yes, all players participate in football, but I don't want to watch a kicker run a 40. I don't want to watch a pocket passing quarterback run a 40. I don't want to watch a 350-pound offensive lineman run a 40. Some of the agility drills, right? Like the vertical jump. Why does that matter for many positions? The arm length. Why does that matter? Like the intangibles, a lot of the measurables, the intangibles, they're just not important. I think the combine needs some revamping. 40 times are a myth. Oh, I run a 4.2. I run a 4.3 in a straight line. Yes, if your goal as soon as you press go is to run a 4.2 in a straight line, yes, you can run a 4.2. But what about when you have to plant your foot in the ground and go somewhere else? What about when a guy across from you actually runs a 4.2 and you're playing defense and you're running in a kind of like the opposite direction, like you're playing catch up? These sideline to sideline linebackers, right? Like absolutely not. If I think a guy who's a real sideline to sideline linebacker whose 40 time is not fraudulent is Peyton Wilson for the Steelers. You saw he ran like a 4.39, 4.41 last year, and it showed on tape. But there's tons of guys who run these alleged 40 times, and it doesn't show up on tape. So then you have to sit there and ask yourself, is the issue with the person who recorded this? Did you have a good day that day? Have you just been planning to do this? It's really similar to standardized testing, right? There's tons of people who have scored highly on standardized testing who have been successful in life, just like there's tons of people who have scored highly on standardized testing who, when it comes time to do the job, cannot do said job, whatever that job entails, right? And it's the same with football, right? So it's a test, and just like standardized testing, there's a whole industry, there's a whole season of productivity if you really think about it, right? Where people are for a 1, 2, 3 month span. And it's different with the ACT, SAT, because it's not like the combine where it's once a year, like they're always offered, throughout the year. So there's like spurts in time where you can make a significant amount of money training people for the test. And if you're the person training for the test, guess what you've been training for? The test. And so when the test comes and you perform well, congratulations, you perform well. But is that going to correlate to your success now that the quote unquote test is no longer there? Because the hack or the cheat code or the reality, right, is that there's always going to be a test, but you won't always have infinite amount of time to study for it, knowing exactly what the test is going to look like. And this is just speaking about on the field stuff at the combine. As far as off the field stuff, that stuff is really, really invasive. It really bothers me. I don't want to get into it right now. Just thinking about the amount of players who've told stories about invasive and inappropriate questions they've been asked in these meetings, and it's always treated as this is just what happens or this is just what we do. But I would have a much better time maybe sleeping with that process if it always led to teams drafting squeaky clean guys. Like if you're going to legitimately purge someone's entire personal history to find out if you should draft them, you better be dang sure that nothing from their personal history pops back up, or none of these issues reflare up, or that you don't have all your players getting into accidents that kill people. You know what I'm saying? The last thing I'll say is do not accept a combine invite if you do not plan to participate in the entire combine. That includes interviews and drills. There's many players who didn't work out and didn't complete workouts, who only went there to talk to NFL teams, but think about how selfish the whole game is. I mean, you have some players who went to a bowl game, right? And they're being scouted at the bowl game. And then they went to the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl or the East West Bowl, whatever bowl they got going on, the HBCU Legacy Bowl. And they talk to more teams, right? They talk to more teams. Then they get invited to the combine to not play football, to just wait and talk to teams. There's tons of players who need exposure, who need to show teams I can run this time and I can move laterally and I can do these drills versus those drills, who will now not get that opportunity because you just wanted to show face and be at the combine because everyone's at the combine. That's whack to me. I don't like that. One more football topic here, and then we are going to transition into what I think is one of the funniest things that has happened ever, like of all time, as far as sports. And I think it's a moment that will be remembered fondly and hilariously throughout life. Like I can see the beef history video coming. I can see we will celebrate the anniversary of this. It was a wild moment. But before we get to that, okay, Matthew Stafford is back with the Los Angeles Rams. First and foremost, I'm pulling for LA. I really want LA to win this year. I think that the city needs that, considering what's going on there recently. But I also think that it really is a testament to the fact that Sean McVay might actually be the boy genius that they all said he was, when he first came out. Like I've always been pretty high on McVay. I'm not saying that he's not a genius or that he's not a great coach. But I think that McVay was the first domino of many that kind of represented like this is the kind of coach that we're looking for, as opposed to the Rob Ryans of the world or the Rex Ryans of the world or the Andy Reids of the world. Also, because maybe those guys exist in less capacities, even though some of them are, position coaches kind of all throughout teams. But it took lots of years of like a Jeff Fisher and a Jim Schwartz, those kind of Hugh Jackson, those kind of guys leading teams to poor seasons consistently for programs to just say, for franchises to just say, well, if we're going to lose, let's at least try to lose and have something sustainable for the future in our coaching staff, or let's try to lose and be different. Or if we're different, we won't lose. That's I think that's the line of thinking that led to the McVays and the Cliff Kingsburys, Dave Canellis, KOC, like those guys getting hired. And power to them, that's great that they've been hired. McVay has a Super Bowl to his name. He has another appearance to his name. But I think that just like I said on this very show, that the Rams are really close. It's like sustained play. Puka Nacua is one of the surest things you can have right now at the wide receiver position. There's no longer Cooper Kupp as that secondary threat, but now you're in a position to draft a receiver. They just re-signed Tutu Atwell to a 1-year, $10 million deal. You can go get a guy. I'm not sure how this T. Higgins stuff is going to play out, but I know McVay will be salivating to get T. Higgins over to play for the Rams. They would throw the house at him. He would match really well with Stafford, like scarily well. You have Tutu Atwell with that speed. Maybe get another speedier guy. Oh man, Tyler Lockett. He's already on that side of the map. I'm sure he'd like to just move down a little bit, go play for them guys. I mean, it on offense. To me, it's going to come together for them. And then defensively, like I talked about on the show, they rebuilt what they lost in a guy like Aaron Donald by committee. They rebuilt their defensive line by committee. They didn't try to go get a Bosa brother. They didn't try to go get Khalil Mack. They said, we're going to draft guys who wreck games. And all of those guys came to the team and wrecked games. They're a very enticing and attractive destination for a free agent, like a Calais Campbell type. And I think that they're really close to being what they would like to be. I just think that Stafford and his agent and his wife, okay, his whole family contributed to him leveraging the New York Giants to get more money. And that was great business from Stafford, but it hurt my soul. I never wanted him to play for the New York Giants. I don't want Matt Stafford. I don't want Aaron Rodgers. I want a young guy. And I wanted Geno Smith, who was just traded for a third-round pick from the Seattle Seahawks to the Raiders. And that's great for him. And I can see Tom Brady having a hand in that move. I can see Pete Carroll obviously loving that move. But at the same time, I never wanted any of those 35, 34 and up guys to play for the New York Giants. I think Russell Wilson is a name that might get linked to us soon, as well. But Stafford let the Rams think that the Giants wanted him to kind of gauge his interest throughout the league, to see how everyone else in the league would feel about that, to see what the Rams would be willing to do as far as a number for Stafford, because this is what the Giants are willing to do, or this is what the Giants and Dayball say he's worth, blah, 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 blah. If you're Joe Shane, I hope you know that you were leveraged the whole time. And if he went into this thinking that he had any shot at getting Stafford, they really got to fire that guy because I mean, he doesn't want to play for you guys. No, no, a lot of the Giants right now are not an attractive destination. There's not enough to sell guys on playing for them. So they're gonna have to catch breaks. They're gonna have to prove themselves this season so that next season they can be that destination. The Giants right now remind me of the Texans, the season that they drafted CJ Stroud, because they just came off of a really, really poor season, right? But they have a lot of pieces that work for them. They just have to decide and find out how those pieces are going to work in real time. It's not just about playing X's and O's on a whiteboard. Like, how are these guys actually going to work? You can't have Wan'Dale Robinson lead the team in receptions and have 700 yards from scrimmage. He had like 97 catches with like 700 yards. You can't have that, right? And I'm sure if you're Daboll, you're like, well, we're getting him the ball in our situations. Yeah, but like, that's not sustainable. Darius Slayton is easily out the door now, so they're in desperate need of a wide receiver too. I think they should re-sign either Cager or Bellinger behind Theo Johnson. You don't need a second receiving tight end. Theo Johnson can block and receive, but he's a Kelsey type, right? Give him the ball. Let him be involved in the passing offense, the passing attack, and use the fact that Tyrone Tracy was a wide receiver. Yeah, we were gushing at how good Tyrone Tracy was, but I mean, how many times did they give him legitimate opportunities to receive the ball out of the backfield? Don't just give him screens. He's a receiver. He can run the tree. Give him something. Give him something, please. Um, yeah. But that of course I talked about Stafford, but it ended up me ranting about the Giants. But yeah, Stafford back with the Rams. Like I said, they were 6 points away from beating the Eagles, and I'm pretty sure they would have beat the Commanders and they would have went to the Super Bowl. Not sure if they would have beaten the Chiefs, but that's neither here nor there. Last but never least, we have beef, ladies and gentlemen. We have unprecedented beef. We have a interaction that was one of the first of its kind. It's never really happened. I'm really trying to really hard right now to think of a moment in which we have a member of the media being approached by an NBA player in this way. NFL players, NBA, NFL players, MLB players, NHL players. You can go right now online and find a compilation of them berating reporters or them kind of getting heated with the reporter back and forth. But how often does that interaction actually get physical? How often does that interaction go beyond? Okay. Earlier this year, there was a reporter who wrote a story about Joel Embiid and talked about how he needs to play better and says that, and he like talked about one of his dead relatives. I believe it was his brother or cousin. And he said, he made a promise that he was going to go hard for his dead relative. And right now he's not living up to that promise. That was nuts. That was certifiably insane that somebody would fix their mouth to say that, whether it's, a written piece of journalism or they're actually speaking it. But a lot of these guys have such cushy lives, the big time ones, the big time journalists who are in the business of writing hit pieces. Stephen A. Smith, when he discussed this on his own show, was like, I'm not in the business of making friends, right? But I certainly don't want to make enemies. Can't have it both ways, right? And I think that there's a respectful way to cover these things. There's a respectful way to be critical of the game, but the issues always arise when the game is not what is at the center. Humanity and the game should be at the center in that order, but that's where the issues always rise. To pivot really briefly, Draymond Green, he got in some hot water just now because he discussed Karl-Anthony Towns missing the game, and he joked that it was because Jimmy Butler wasn't there. And Baron Davis egged him on. And they went on like this for about an hour, a minute and a half, just for it to be revealed that he missed the game because he was at a funeral for a friend of his girlfriend who passed away due to cancer. Karl-Anthony Towns has lost 5 or 6 people to cancer/COVID. And so him going through this, and there's people who are like, oh, well, it's just his girlfriend's friend. Why does that matter, right? It's about humanity. It should be about humanity. And one of the things about humanity that should be a principle is that you have your privacy when you're grieving, right? You have your privacy to an extent. We as society believe that we are owed these players' lives because of how much money we invest into them or how much money they're making or how often you can pay money and go watch them do what they do as a way of spectacle or display. But at the same time, Draymond Green and many people in this new media, so to speak, should also be held accountable when they take it past the game and outside of the scope of humanity, which is exactly what he did. And when he was confronted on it by a media member, he got very defensive and then he promoted his own show. Shameless. Sounds just like Stephen A. Smith when he was confronted by one LeBron James. So set the scene here. LeBron James was playing the New York Knicks. LeBron versus the Knicks. LeBron and Luka versus the Knicks. This is a box office game. LeBron, Luka, Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Cat. This is a prime time big game. This game was such a big deal that it went into overtime, and the Lakers' comeback was successful. Brunson sustained an ankle injury in overtime that obviously clipped the wings of the Knicks. Brunson will be out for 2 weeks, reevaluated in 2 weeks. But LeBron James, at the start of the fourth quarter, sitting down for a timeout, saw he had a little bit of extra time on his hands. He saw Stephen A. Smith was sitting near him. He said, let me go confront this guy because he's been talking crazy. And that's what he did. That's my king. No, I'm playing. That is my GOAT. Nah, the LeBron fandom has gotten out of hand online and in real life, but take that stuff out of it, bro. This is man to man. This is principled stuff. Omar from The Wire, no last name needed. A man got to have a code, right? And if you're going to be a principled individual, an opinionated individual like Stephen A. Smith, you would imagine you have a code and that you respect it and live by it. If I'm Stephen A. Smith in that moment, I deserve everything that's coming to me based on my own code of ethics, right? I don't subscribe to his code or even LeBron James's code, whatever that code may be. But I don't even watch Stephen A. Smith's shows religiously, but you see the clips on Twitter and you see they get suggested to you on YouTube. And he pleaded with LeBron James through a screen as a father to get his son out of the NBA, the National Basketball Association. That's disgusting. That's outside of humanity. That's outside of the sport. Yes, Bronny was struggling. There are countless players who are also rookies who are struggling. Just like there are countless players who are rookies who are thriving, whose names are not getting spoken because Stephen A. Smith wants to have this axe to grind. Um, yeah, you make a lot of money, right? But that doesn't make you above anything, and you have an obligation. How many hours of basketball do you think Stephen A. Smith watches per week? I would love to know because I'm pretty sure the answer is less than 5. Shannon Sharp revealed that he doesn't watch the games with the sound when he watches NBA and NFL games. He watches the highlights above. He'll probably be doing his show just like this, and he'll look above and he'll watch the highlights, and he'll have a bunch of split screens. So we're getting sports bar takes from two dudes who are above 50 years old, and they're both making so much money that now we don't have the shows on ESPN where people are watching the game, which is how you get these explosive takes because they're grasping for straws. And so part of Stephen A. Smith's mistake with his set of comments and his line of questioning on Bronny James's involvement in the NBA is due to his lack of doing his actual job, his lack of commitment to the obligation he has to people. You're making $20 million a year, and you always like to talk about like you're this hot commodity. You're stealing the cameras when you walk in for a basketball game. You're wearing thousand plus dollar suits. I don't care. I don't dream about how much his suits are. I don't want to speculate about how much they cost. I don't care. The point is, there's so many players who we don't talk about because of what you're doing, because of the way that you cover the league. He wanted to get annoyed earlier because Charles Barkley took shots at ESPN, namely Kendrick Perkins himself and Shannon Sharp, none of which are covering the game in ways that are growing the game or making the casual fan excited to watch it. Kendrick Perkins frustrates me the most because as a former player, when he wants to talk X's and O's or he wants to bring shine to an aspect of the game or a coach or something like that, he does a great job. But then when he starts to try to speak in hyperbolic ways to quote unquote clip farm, right? It is so BS. It ruins it. And so Barkley was right to call those guys out, right? Inside the NBA is not doing a much better job, but those guys need to get called out because of the leverage at the network. TNT could not keep inside the NBA. Like they're not a basketball network. They're like, we do this, this, this. We only really dabble in basketball during March Madness because they don't even broadcast games anymore like that. Because they used to broadcast a lot more games. And so, but at ESPN, it's like Stephen A. Smith, you're the top guy. Pat McAfee's the top guy. Like you guys have an obligation to do your thing, you know? And when you take it outside the scope, the apology better be as loud as the disrespect. So instead of just apologizing, Stephen A. Smith, yeah, he apologized when LeBron James pressed him, all 6'9", 250 of them in the middle of the game, blood rushing, adrenaline up. Yeah, he apologized right there to his face. Then he tweeted about it. Then he went on his show the next day. Then he went on his other show privately after and played the victim. That's the problem with the state of media right now when it comes to sports, because that kind of stuff gets way more engagement. And then watching somebody actually talk about their sport in a way that's meaningful gets significantly less. And so over time, the reputation is that the second person doesn't know what they're doing or that there are ways to just get them on the screen. It's like get them off the screen. But we have Stephen A. Smith on the screen talking down about a 55th pick in the NBA and talking about all of this other stuff. Like, yeah, like press him, Bron. You know what I'm saying? And all of his coworkers who be blowing smoke, kissing the ring on TV. I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth it. I hope y'all get promoted. I hope it's worth it because what the way the fall from grace that he has had as far as his efficiency and his effectiveness at doing his job hurts me because I want to be a fan of his, right? You have two guys, HBCU graduates, with him and Shannon Sharp acting how they do. Don't get me started on what Mr. Sharp be doing on that little Club Shay Shay joint. Don't get me started. It cheapens the value of what we think we know as journalism. It cheapens the value. And every time these guys get called out on it, oh well, how am I supposed to? And I'm doing this, and people don't love me for this. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I love LeBron James calling out Stephen A. Smith right before the fourth quarter, then going back on the floor, winning the game in overtime, and then not saying nothing about it. I love that. That's so baller. This man has been eviscerated for over 25 years based on the kind of player he could or couldn't be. And it gets to a point. Gets to a point. So shout out Bron, shout out Cat. We gotta cover the game and these players with this aspect and this level of humanity. And yes, the sport comes second, but humanity has got to come first. Because otherwise you will have this. That's why you get these moments. You get these people confronting people in the stands at high school games. You get these people fighting refs. You get these people cussing out who God knows who and spitting on people. You get people biting each other. That's how you get what you get. When you foster that culture from a journalism standpoint. So, we ended it on that little rant there. But I say all that to say LeBron James is the king. 50,000 points he eclipsed very recently. And the Lakers look good, man. Fourth best record in the league. Shout out to Luka Magic. See y'all, episode 12.